The morning sky was heavy with dark clouds, and the city was drenched in relentless rain. The streets glistened with puddles, and cold gusts of wind rushed between buildings, making people clutch their coats tighter. It was the kind of day where most preferred to stay indoors. But for Maria, that wasn't an option. Maria had just started her job as a cleaner at Kingsworth Corporation 2 days ago. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and she needed it. After months of struggling to find a job, she couldn't afford to be late, no matter how bad the weather was. She held her small, flimsy umbrella tightly as she hurried down the street, her worn-out shoes splashing through puddles. Her uniform was already damp from the rain, but she ignored it. She had bigger problems to worry about, like making it to work on time and keeping her job. As she turned a corner near the office building, something made her stop in her tracks. Near a bus stop, an old woman stood alone, shivering in the rain. Her clothes were soaked through, and her bare feet rested on the freezing wet pavement. She had no umbrella, no coat, nothing to protect her from the merciless cold. She simply stood there, her frail hands trembling as she stared blankly into the distance. Maria felt a pang of sorrow in her chest. Other pedestrians passed by, glancing at the old woman but doing nothing to help. Some shook their heads, some avoided looking at her, but no one stopped. Maria's heart ached. She was struggling herself, but she couldn't just walk away. She stepped forward and held her umbrella over the woman's head. "Mama, take this," Maria said gently. "You'll get sick standing here like this." The old woman turned her tired eyes toward Maria, blinking as if she wasn't sure if she had heard correctly. "My daughter," the woman whispered, her voice weak, "I have nowhere to go. I came from the village, but I don't know anyone here." Maria's fingers tightened around the handle of her umbrella. She hesitated for a moment, then reached into her pocket. She had only a few bills, just enough for a simple lunch later, but without thinking, she held the money out to the old woman. "Here, Mama," Maria said. "Find somewhere to stay, at least for today." The woman's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. "I cannot take what you need for yourself, my child." Maria sighed. The woman was too proud to accept charity, and she understood that. She thought for a moment, then made a decision. "Then come with me," Maria said, smiling softly. "I'm going to work, but you can sit somewhere dry until you figure out what to do." The old woman hesitated, her eyes searching Maria's face as if trying to understand why this stranger was being so kind. But finally, she nodded. "May the heavens bless you, my daughter," she murmured. Maria took the woman's cold, frail hand and led her toward Kingsworth Corporation. They walked together under the small umbrella, two strangers who had found each other on a rainy morning. When Maria arrived at the office building, she felt the usual wave of nerves wash over her. This was a high-class company. The floors gleamed, the employees wore sharp suits, and even the air smelled expensive. She knew that someone like her didn't belong here, but she couldn't afford to care. As they stepped inside, Maria found a small corner for the old woman to sit. "Mama, don't worry," she reassured her. "I only have a few hours before my break. After that, I'll help you find somewhere safe." The old woman smiled and nodded, watching Maria as she hurried off to start her work. Maria had so little, yet she gave so much. Little did she know, this simple act of kindness would change her life forever. The Kingsworth Corporation office was a picture of elegance. The glass walls, the polished floors, and the soft hum of productivity made it clear, this was a place of power. Maria moved quickly, grabbing a mop and bucket from the supply closet. She had no time to waste. The last thing she wanted was to get in trouble for slacking off. She stole a quick glance at the corner where she had left the old woman. The woman sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, looking down at the floor humbly. She wasn't disturbing anyone. Maria smiled to herself and got to work. The atmosphere in the office suddenly shifted. The sound of heels clicking against the floor echoed through the hallway. Employees whispered amongst themselves, straightening their postures, as a woman strutted through the entrance like she owned the place. Vanessa Montclair was the fiancée of Adrian Kingsworth, the CEO. She was beautiful, wealthy, and loved reminding everyone that soon, she would be their boss's wife. She wore a tight designer dress that clung to her figure and a pair of red-bottom heels that announced her presence before she even spoke. And Vanessa loved attention. She walked past the reception desk without greeting anyone, her sharp eyes scanning the office until they landed on the old woman sitting in the corner. Her face twisted in disgust. "What is this?" she said loudly, ensuring that everyone could hear her. Silence fell across the office. The workers who had been typing and making calls stopped what they were doing. Maria's stomach sank. She turned around slowly, gripping the mop handle tightly as she saw Vanessa marching toward the elderly woman. "Who let this dirty old beggar in here?" Vanessa sneered. The old woman looked up, confused, her tired eyes meeting Vanessa's cold, judgmental gaze. "My child, please do not be angry," she said softly. "I will leave now." Vanessa scoffed. "You should have never been here in the first place." She crossed her arms. "This is a high-class company, not a shelter for filthy strays." The rage that boiled in Maria's chest was immediate. She dropped the mop and stepped forward. "Vanessa, that's enough." Gasps rippled through the office. No one ever spoke back to Vanessa. Vanessa turned sharply, her eyes burning with fury. "Excuse me," she hissed. Maria's hands clenched into fists. "You have no right to treat an elderly woman like this," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "She isn't causing any harm. She's just sitting quietly, trying to get dry." Vanessa's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Oh, how cute. The little cleaner thinks she has a say in how this company is run." Maria refused to back down. "You may be the CEO's fiancé, but that doesn't give you the right to treat people like trash." Vanessa's eyes widened, and then she laughed mockingly. "You really think your opinion matters? Look at you. You're just a pathetic little worker, while she tossed her hair over her shoulder, will soon be running this entire company." She turned back to the old woman. "Get out, now." The old woman slowly rose to her feet, her frail hands trembling slightly. She did not argue, she did not fight back. She only walked toward the door, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. Maria's heart broke. Her jaw clenched as she watched the woman leave the building. Defeated and humiliated, she could feel every pair of eyes in the office on her, waiting to see what she would do next. Maria took a deep breath, turned sharply, and marched straight toward Vanessa. Vanessa was already seated in one of the luxurious office chairs, admiring her nails like nothing had happened. Maria stormed up to her, stopping just inches away. "Who do you think you are?" she demanded. Vanessa glanced up lazily, her expression bored. "Oh, the poor little worker is back. What do you want?" Maria's hands trembled with fury. "That woman is old enough to be your grandmother. How dare you treat her like she's worthless?" Vanessa rolled her eyes. "That dirty beggar, please," she smirked. "People like her don't belong here." Maria's breath hitched. "And what if she was your future mother-in-law?" she snapped. Vanessa froze. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Then, just as quickly, she recovered and laughed. "Never," she scoffed. "My mother-in-law is nothing like that filthy woman. She's classy, beautiful, just like me." Maria shook her head in disappointment. "You think beauty and money make a good wife? No, a good wife is kind, respectful, and loving, but you," she narrowed her eyes, "are arrogant and cruel. You will never know what true love is." Vanessa's face darkened. "How dare you talk to me like that?" she hissed. "You are going to regret this. Mark my words, you will lose your job." Maria laughed bitterly. "I don't care. I don't want to work in a place where people like you exist." With one final glare, she spun on her heel and stormed out of the office. Vanessa clenched her fists, her face red with anger. "We'll see about that," she muttered. Maria rushed to the old woman, who was standing outside, near the gate, looking lost and heartbroken. "Mama, what happened?" Maria asked breathlessly. The woman sighed heavily. "That woman came in and told me to leave. She said I was dirty and poor, and that I do not belong here." Maria's hands clenched into fists. Her anger was unlike anything she had ever felt before. Who dared to do this to such a kind soul? Then the old woman hesitated before whispering the name. "She said she is the CEO's wife-to-be. Her name is Vanessa." Maria's blood boiled. She turned sharply and stormed back inside. She didn't care about her job anymore. Vanessa had crossed a line. and Maria was not going to let her get away with it. Maria's blood boiled as she stormed back into the office. Her footsteps were quick and filled with rage. She didn't care if she was just a cleaner. She didn't care if Vanessa was rich and powerful. She had no right to treat an elderly woman like garbage. Vanessa was still seated in the executive lounge area, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Maria didn't hesitate. "Vanessa," she called, her voice firm and unshaken. The room fell into silence. Employees froze, turning their heads toward the two women. No one ever dared to challenge Vanessa. Vanessa looked up lazily and smirked. "Oh, you're back. I thought I told you to get lost." Maria's fists clenched at her sides. "How dare you treat an elderly woman like that? What gives you the right to insult someone just because they have less than you?" Vanessa rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "You're still talking about that beggar?" She laughed mockingly. "You act as if she's someone important." Maria took a deep breath. Trying to control herself, she wouldn't let Vanessa win. She is someone important. Every human being deserves respect. Maria's eyes burned with anger. "If this is how you treat strangers, I wonder how you'll treat your future mother-in-law." Vanessa scoffed. "Please, my mother-in-law is nothing like that dirty woman." She tossed her hair. "She's elegant, wealthy, and classy, like me. When she meets me, she'll love me instantly." Maria shook her head in disappointment. "You are blind, Vanessa." Vanessa's smirk disappeared. Maria stepped closer. "You think beauty and money make a good wife? No, a good wife is kind, respectful, and loving. But you're arrogant and cruel. You will never know what true love is." Vanessa's eyes flashed with rage. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You are a nobody, a mere cleaner, and you think you can lecture me?" Maria smirked bitterly. "I may be a cleaner, but at least I have a heart." Vanessa's face turned red with anger. "You're going to regret this," she spat. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Maria took a step back and crossed her arms. "I don't care. I refuse to work in a place where people like you exist." With that, Maria turned around and walked out of the office, leaving Vanessa fuming behind her. Maria found the elderly woman waiting for her outside. The sadness in her tired eyes made Maria's heart ache. "My child, you didn't have to fight for me," the woman said softly. Maria held her hand and smiled. "I had to, Mama. No one has the right to treat you that way." The woman squeezed Maria's hand. "You are a good soul." Maria nodded. "Let's go home, Mama." The two women walked away together, not realizing that their lives were about to change forever. Vanessa sat in pure anger, clenching her fists. Maria had humiliated her in front of the entire office. She wouldn't let her get away with it. She grabbed her phone and dialed the number. The line rang once before a deep male voice answered. "Vanessa?" She immediately put on a fake sobbing voice. "Adrian, something terrible just happened." There was a pause on the other end. "What's wrong? Are you okay, Adrian?" The CEO sounded concerned. Vanessa sniffled dramatically. "That girl you hired, Maria. She brought her street friends into the office. They insulted me, threatened me, and nearly attacked me." There was silence. Then Adrian sighed. "Are you serious?" "Yes, I was so scared." "Adrian, you need to fire her immediately. She's dangerous." Adrian rubbed his forehead. "Fine, I'll handle it." Vanessa smirked. "Thank you, baby, you're the best." She hung up the phone and leaned back in her chair. Maria had no idea what was coming for her. Later that evening, Maria's phone rang. She answered, confused by the unknown number. "Hello?" a sharp voice responded. "Maria, this is Adrian Kingsworth, the CEO of Kingsworth Corporation." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She had never spoken to him before, only heard his name. "Sir, good evening." But Adrian wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. "How dare you bring strangers into my office and start a fight with my fiancée?" Maria's eyes widened in shock. "Sir, that's not what happened. I only helped an old woman who had nowhere to go." Vanessa insulted her and threw her out. Adrian scoffed. "So, you're saying Vanessa is lying?" Maria sighed. "I'm telling you the truth. I would never fight at work." Adrian was silent for a moment, then said coldly, "You should have waited for me to handle the issue myself." Maria frowned. "Sir, you weren't there. Would you have preferred I let your fiancé insult an elderly woman and do nothing?" Adrian ignored her question. You're new here, Maria. You've only worked for 2 days. And you're already causing problems. Maria was getting frustrated. Sir, I only defended someone who was mistreated. If that's a problem, then maybe this isn't the place for me. Adrian sighed. Vanessa said she will leave me if I don't fire you. Maria felt a sharp pain in her chest. So, that was it. He wasn't firing her because she did something wrong. He was firing her to please his fiancée. Maria laughed bitterly. Sir, I'm not surprised. Adrian's voice hardened. What do you mean? Maria's voice was firm. I may have only worked for 2 days. But I already see the kind of man you are. You let your fiancé control you. You're a weak man. Sir. Adrian's breath hitched. What did you just say? Maria shook her head. You heard me, sir, and guess what? I don't even care. Keep your job. I don't need it. And with that, she ended the call. Maria sat in silence, gripping her phone tightly. She had lost her job. But at least, she had stood up for what was right. Maria sat in silence, gripping her phone tightly. She had lost her job. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because the CEO was too weak to stand up to his fiancée. She sighed and placed her phone down. She had bills to pay, rent due at the end of the month. And now, on top of everything, she had to worry about the elderly woman she had taken in. She had no regrets. If losing her job meant standing up for someone who deserved kindness, then so be it. She turned to the old woman sitting on her small mattress. The woman looked at her with gentle concern. My child, who called you? Maria forced a smile. It was my boss. He fired me. The woman gasped, her face filling with guilt. Because of me. Maria nodded, but quickly added, don't blame yourself, Mama. I would do it all over again if I had to. The woman reached forward, holding Maria's hands. May the heavens bless you. My daughter, you will never lack in life. Maria smiled, but deep inside, she was worried. She needed a new job, and fast. Later that night, Maria was washing the few dishes she owned when she heard Mama's phone ring. She turned sharply. She had never really paid attention to the phone before, but now that it was ringing, she noticed something. It was a very expensive smartphone. The latest model, one that someone like Mama shouldn't be able to afford. Maria wiped her hands quickly as the old woman answered. Hello, a deep male voice came from the other end. Mama, I just got back from my trip. Where are you? I've been worried. Maria froze. Mama's son, I'm fine, my child. The woman responded, I will come home tomorrow. The man sighed. Please do, I don't feel well, and I need to see you. Mama's face changed slightly. Are you sick? Just tired. The man said, come home, Mama. The call ended, and Mama placed the phone in her lap. Maria couldn't hold back her curiosity any longer. Mama, who was that? The woman smiled. My son. Maria was surprised. You have a son in this city? Mama nodded. Yes. He just returned from his trip. Maria frowned. Then why didn't you stay with him? Why were you in the streets with nowhere to go? Mama hesitated for a moment before responding. I had my reasons. Maria glanced at the expensive phone again. Something wasn't adding up. Mama, how did you get such a costly phone? Mama blinked quickly before laughing nervously. Oh, my son bought it for me. I love watching a certain TV show. But my street has no electricity most of the time. So, my son got me this phone so I could watch it whenever I wanted. Maria narrowed her eyes slightly. Who buys such an expensive phone just for a TV show? Something was off, but Maria didn't push further. Instead, she smiled. Your son must really love you. Mama nodded proudly. He does. And you will too, when you meet him. Maria laughed. Mama, stop trying to match me with your son. Let me meet him first. Mama grinned knowingly. Oh, you will. Maria shook her head playfully, still not knowing what was really happening behind the scenes. Mama woke up early, preparing to leave. Maria helped her pack a small bag and hugged her tightly. Call me when you get there. Okay, Mama smiled. I will. Maria watched her leave, feeling a strange sense of curiosity. Something about this whole situation felt odd. Mama arrived at her son's house later that morning. Only, it wasn't a small house. It was a mansion, a massive estate with tall iron gates, multiple security guards, and luxury cars parked inside. She approached the gate, standing patiently as the security guard spoke into his walkie-talkie. A sharp female voice came through the speaker. "Who is it?" "An old woman," the guard responded. "She says she's here for the boss." There was a brief silence. Then, the gate swung open, and out stepped Vanessa. Mama's face remained calm, but inside, she was boiling with anger. Vanessa froze in place. Her expression twisted the moment she saw who was standing there. Then, her face filled with disgust. "You again?" she sneered. "What are you doing here? You foolish old woman." Mama stood tall despite her exhaustion. "I am here to see my son." Vanessa laughed cruelly. "Your son? Who?" She crossed her arms and smirked. "You must be crazy. Maybe you got lost on your way back to your miserable home." Mama's hands clenched into fists. "You are a mannerless girl," she said, her voice steady. "One day, you will regret the way you treat people." Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Did my village enemies send you here to stalk me?" she whispered mockingly. "Because it won't work." Then, flipping her perfectly styled hair, she turned back toward the house. Before disappearing inside, she threw one last insult. "Never come near my husband's house again. You are not wanted here." And then, the door slammed shut. Mama stood there frozen. She had traveled all this way, just to be insulted like a beggar. Her hands shook with anger as she pulled out her phone and dialed her son's number. The moment he picked up, she didn't waste time. "Come home now." Her voice was strong but filled with pain. "I am at your gate, and I have never been so insulted in my life." 15 minutes later, a sleek black car screeched to a stop outside the mansion. The driver's door flew open, and out stepped a tall, well-dressed man in a dark suit. His face was handsome, serious, and filled with fury. This was Adrian Kingsworth, the real CEO of Kingsworth Corporation. And when he saw his mother standing outside his own house in rags, his heart filled with rage. He rushed to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Mama, what happened? Why are you standing outside?" Mama took a deep breath and placed a gentle hand on his cheek. "My son, I came to your company to test your fiancée." Adrian's expression darkened. "What?" Mama nodded. "I disguised myself to see if she was truly a good woman. She failed." Adrian's breathing became heavy. "Tell me everything." And as his mother spoke, his rage boiled over. Vanessa had disrespected his mother. That was unforgivable. And before the night was over, he was going to make things right. Adrian stood frozen as his mother finished her story. His breathing was heavy, his hands clenched into fists. Vanessa had humiliated his own mother, the woman who had raised him, sacrificed for him, and shaped him into the man he was today. And he had almost married her. His jaw tightened as he looked at his mother, who stood tall despite her exhaustion. "Come inside, Mama." His voice was low, filled with barely controlled anger. "I will handle this." Mama nodded but placed a hand on his shoulder. "My son, do not act out of anger. Think carefully before you make a decision." But Adrian's mind was already made up. Vanessa was about to face the consequences of her actions. Adrian walked into his mansion, his steps heavy and purposeful. Vanessa was lounging on the couch, sipping wine, looking at her nails as if she had no care in the world. When she saw Adrian, she smiled sweetly. "Honey, you're back. I missed you." But Adrian didn't smile. His expression was unreadable, his jaw tight. Vanessa pouted. "Why do you look so serious?" Adrian didn't answer. Instead, he took a deep breath and said coldly, "Did you throw an old woman out of my office?" Vanessa froze for a second. Then she laughed lightly, waving her hand. "Oh, that beggar, baby, she was filthy. I did you a favor. People like that don't belong in your office." Adrian's eyes darkened. "You mean my mother?" Vanessa's smile disappeared instantly. Her entire body stiffened. What?" she stammered. "Why your mother?" Adrian nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Yes, the woman you humiliated and threw out like trash, is my mother." Vanessa's face turned pale. She took a small step back, her hands trembling. I didn't know." "If I had known." Adrian cut her off sharply. "It doesn't matter if you knew or not. The fact that you can treat any elderly person like that, whether rich or poor, tells me exactly who you are." Vanessa panicked, reaching for his hand. "Baby, Please, I was just joking, I swear. Adrian jerked his hand away. His voice was cold. Pack your things. We're done. Vanessa's eyes widened in horror. No, Adrian, you can't do this. I love you. Adrian let out a bitter laugh. Love? You don't know what love is. You only love power and money. Vanessa shook her head wildly, tears streaming down her face. Please, I can change. Give me another chance. Adrian's face was stone cold. There is no second chance. Get out. Vanessa let out a frustrated scream, grabbing her bag. Before leaving, she turned back and spat. You're a fool. No woman will ever love you the way I did. Adrian didn't flinch. He simply watched as she stormed out of his house forever. And for the first time in a long time, Adrian felt free. As the night stretched on, Adrian sat in silence, thinking about everything. Then, a realization hit him. He had made a terrible mistake. He had fired Maria, the one woman who had stood up for his mother. The one woman who had proven her heart was genuine. And he had done it based on Vanessa's lies. His chest tightened. He needed to fix this. Immediately. The next morning, Maria was preparing breakfast when her phone rang. She picked it up and frowned. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello, a familiar voice responded. Maria, this is James, the manager from Kingsworth Corporation. Maria froze. Sir? James took a deep breath. Maria, I'm calling on behalf of my boss. He realizes now that he made a mistake. He wants to rehire you, but not as a cleaner. This time, he's offering you a position as his personal assistant. Maria's mouth fell open. What? He personally requested you for the role. Maria's heart raced. She had not expected this. She could reject the offer. She didn't owe him anything. But, she needed a job. After a moment, she took a deep breath and said, Okay, I accept. The next day, Maria walked into Kingsworth Corporation, this time, with confidence. She was no longer a cleaner. She was now the CEO's personal assistant. She knocked on his office door. Come in. She stepped inside, and froze in shock. Sitting behind the desk was Adrian Kingsworth, the same Adrian she had insulted over the phone just days ago. Her boss. Her heart pounded. Why you? Adrian smiled slightly. Welcome back, Maria. Maria swallowed hard. This was going to be interesting. Over the next few weeks, Maria worked closely with Adrian. Slowly, she began to trust him. One evening, Adrian took a deep breath and finally told her everything. He told her how he disguised himself to test her heart. Maria was furious at first. You tricked me. Adrian nodded. Yes, but not to hurt you. I just needed to be sure that you were genuine. Maria sighed heavily. Then, she surprised him. She smiled slightly. I'm still mad, but I understand. Adrian chuckled. So, you forgive me? Maria crossed her arms. I'll think about it. Adrian laughed. And that was the moment he knew he had fallen in love with her. A month later, Adrian took Maria to a beautiful restaurant. As they finished dinner, he suddenly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. He opened it, revealing a diamond ring. Maria's eyes widened. Maria, Adrian said, will you marry me? Tears welled up in Maria's eyes. She looked at the man before her, a man who had tested her, learned from his mistakes, and grown into someone better. With a soft laugh, she whispered, yes. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, and the entire restaurant erupted in applause. Months later, they had a beautiful wedding, surrounded by family and friends. And in the front row, smiling proudly, sat Mama, the woman who had started it all. Maria had lost a job that day, but she had gained a future filled with love and happiness.